Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today on developing your online growth strategy and choosing a path that fits. I'll do a quick introduction of myself and let Melissa Lubin. Melissa, I'll let you give a quick introduction of yourself. This is Nicole Forschler-Horn. I'm Vice President of Education Dynamics for University Partnerships. And I've worked with Melissa Lubin for many years now. Melissa, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay, thank you, Nicole, and hello, everyone. I am the Dean of Professional and Continuing Education at James Madison University, which is in Harrisonburg, Virginia. And in our area, we oversee both online and off-campus programming in the credit and non-credit arenas. We also work with our communities and community engagement initiatives and economic development as well. So we've got a pretty broad portfolio, and we have been partnering with JMH for quite a few years now in both the credit and non-credit programs. So I think Nicole and I are going to pull on our experiences together across those two different types of programs, and hopefully that will resonate with all of you.
And just so that we don't confuse everyone, JMH Consulting became part of Education Dynamics about a year ago. So if you hear JMH, you should go ahead and just assume it's Education Dynamics. All right. I, of course, have to first and foremost talk about the Conference on Adult Learning and Enrollment Management that is coming up February 25th through the 27th. I hope that you can make it. If you work in a leadership position, this is a fantastic conference. If you work in marketing or with recruiting, this is a fantastic conference. And in Orlando, it's going to be absolutely a wonderful time. We've got some great speakers lined up, so check it out. Okay, so the other thing before we get started is just a couple of housekeeping things for everyone. The first thing is, if you have a question while we are talking today, feel free to raise your hand. And you can see on the GoToWebinar there's a questions area, and you can ask the question and send it either to one of the organizers or send it to everybody. So go ahead and do so. And we will be recording this webinar and sharing it with everyone. So that's, if for some reason life, work pulls you away, or you're like, this was a phenomenal webinar, I need to share it with 3 or 5 or 10 other people, you can do so. So that's kind of the housekeeping stuff. So let's get into what we're going to be talking about today. Here's our agenda. We're going to be taking a look at how you evaluate your position, and coming out of that, how you determine your next steps, your plan of action. We're going to be focused on whether your plan should be focused on building internal capabilities or on buying resources. And we'll explore some questions to ask to help frame that decision and conversation. We'll go through the pros and cons of both, and then recommendations for when you are finding a partner. Okay, so let's get started. So we'll kick off by talking about evaluating your position. So as you're looking to put together your plan for the next year, for the next 18 months, start with where you are right now. Who are you in your space? And that is, are you a leader in the continuing education and educating adult student space? Are you just getting started in the space? How are you positioned within the university? And taking that into consideration is always important, because that's going to help you get a sense for what you can and cannot do. If you You know, if you have a huge department and you're making tens of millions of dollars, you're going to have a lot more room to test and try for most universities, as opposed to just getting up and getting on your feet. What are you good at and what are you known for? And then who are your competitors? All of that is a little bit of who are you and evaluating your position. And that goes nicely into what we recommend you do next.
Very good. So as you're digging deeper into evaluating your position, it's just really helpful to do a SWOT analysis. And I'm sure most of you have probably done this in many other areas, maybe when you're figuring out whether you should launch a program or not, or whether you're going to be expanding your unit organizationally. Doing a SWOT analysis to figure out whether you can handle, as Nicole was just saying, internally all that needs to be done, or whether you're going to need to partner in some aspect and go externally. So again, the SWOT is just really looking at where your differentiators are, what are your key strengths in your business operations, including your programs, your reputation, your location, and when you compare yourself, your kind of distinguishing feature against your competitors, how do you really think that you stand out? So really isolating these strengths out and knowing full who you are is really helpful. And then, of course, taking that assessment, taking that time up front to really look inside and say, where are our weaknesses? Where are the areas where we don't have capacity, where we just are, maybe we don't have the resources to really fully invest to the level we need to, or perhaps it's an area where we don't have the right staff in and we're needing to make some shifts and changes, but that's going to take some time. So again, looking inside yourself to find out where your vulnerabilities are, and if you have the resources, where would it be that you would invest in? What would be your biggest need? What would give you the most bang for your buck, if you will? Then once you do this thing internally, what you'll want to do is look externally and think about what are those big, opportunities that are out there, and how can you leverage them? Who are the players out there that are doing things really well? And is there someone that, another colleague that you have that you can tap into and learn from and leverage that relationship? Do you already have a relationship with perhaps a partner that can help you identify other partners? So think about the opportunities out there, whether it's new programs, whether it's the political climate or the socioeconomic climate, the changes that are happening around wherever you're located. Look externally and find out those areas that you can really tap into and those trends that can impact you the most. And then last, look also at what's coming down the pike that can be a threat to you, and know that if you were to go in this direction or to invest more in this direction, what would be the worst case scenario? What is happening out there or could possibly happen if something changes, in the economic or political or technological frontiers. So looking just fully at all of those external areas will help you identify where you are as a organization and what your needs are both externally and internally.
Melissa, when you think about doing a SWOT, when you think about doing a SWOT, do you think I just want to get my leadership in the room, or do you like to make the audience bigger, or does it depending on kind of what's happening in the department? I'm curious as to your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's that is a great question. I really love, depending on the situation, I think there's different approaches, but I love involving those that you trust that are external to your organization, because they will give you that hard truth that you need to know. And I think this is ideally, Nicole, we've worked together before where I've asked someone from your staff to come in and join for a brainstorming session that can share with us what's going on, that you might have your finger on the pulse in areas that we don't. So we've done that in other kinds of, decision-making strategies, right, where you go outside and involve. So I would definitely recommend sometimes if it's if it's something that you really want to keep very close to the vest and you want to do something that's pretty tight, keeping those that really understand and know your business well. If you need to move quickly and do some things, that might be a reason to only stay internally. But when possible, you want a diverse audience that will give you a different perspective, that will only enhance what you come up with.
Okay, great.
So the other thing that once you've done your SWOT analysis and you really have a better sense of who you are, you then want to figure out what is your goal. And Nicole and I really have come up with these three overarching things to think about when you're looking at goals. And one of them is, are you trying to optimize something that you're already doing? And is it just a tweak? Or is it a major overhaul? I mean, those are important distinctions. Diversification is really about being able to expand. Do you want to expand the number of programs that you're offering, or perhaps the types of audiences that you're reaching out to? Or is it purely for financial growth, that you've got something that's moving really strongly and you want to deepen that exposure that you have so that you can grow financially? I know, as an example, at JMU, and this is an area where we asked Education Dynamics to partner with us on, is our Bachelor of Individualized Studies program, which is our adult degree program, completion program. And, this was a program we've had for 40 years. It's been moderately successful, pretty consistent, really wasn't, doing anything extraordinary. We weren't really growing it. We weren't losing money. We weren't making a lot of money. We were meeting the needs of pretty much a local audience. And we really decided that we were not optimizing what we could do in this space. One of the areas, we don't have expertise in digital marketing. We just don't have the expertise in that as a university. And we're getting better. We're building that. But at the time when we first decided to partner with Education Dynamics, we didn't. And so we knew that was a missed opportunity for us. The other thing is we also knew we didn't have the depth of people that were working within our organization that could handle much more of an increase in students. And so we also didn't have the resources to hire and develop and train a staff. So we thought the best way to optimize a program that we felt was good was to partner and to have people that really knew how to advance the marketing, that could help with that initial pipeline of bringing in leads and sorting them through and then handing them to us when they were really ready to begin the program, where we could do more of the academic advising. That was something that really helped us. And by optimizing our program, we've been, I think, together, Nicole, we're in our third year, I believe. Is that right? Yeah. With the ADP?
That's right.
And it's been amazing. We've almost doubled our enrollment. And it's been a slow build, and it really caught on in this past year. It took about 2 years of this investment up front to get where we needed to. And I feel like something has been unleashed. We've really gotten the traction. We've also, because of that, had financial growth. So when you think about the goal, our goal was really about, optimizing, growing enrollment, and we're now seeing the fruition of that through financial growth. So we were able to have a goal and accomplish other things along the way.
And I like the question of what is your goal, because your goal, the way we've always approached it is there are going to be investment years. And these are years where you should manage your own expectation of, you want to see growth that's not financial, that is strengthening of staff, that is strengthening of offerings, that's strengthening of capabilities. But having that optimization, fine-tuning investment year will naturally lead to diversification and financial growth. And having the conversations with leadership around expectations for goal is important. Okay.
Very good.
All
so
right.
This is really, talking about the steps and, again, identifying, we know what your position, once you really feel firm about your position, you really have done this internal and external scan to understand your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and you've defined your goals. Then the next step is really figuring out what are those steps that will lead to the goal.
And what we like to do is, this is where you really can, in this slide, it's totally reasonable to share with your team. This is where we are at, is our position. If you've gone through your SWOT with just your leadership and an outside consultant, you can share the results of your SWOT. You can also include your team in that process to get their 2 cents. The goals might be something that you as leadership should be articulating and determining, but get everybody on the same page. This is a great chance to bring your team together and say, okay, guys, what are our ideas to meet our goals, given the fact that we've got these strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and this is the position we are in the market. This is your chance to challenge not only your leadership, but your individual contributors within your department, because they are frequently on the front line and can see what is possible. I always like to come up with as many ideas, no bad ideas in brainstorming, as possible. But once you do that, we like to put them on little sticky notes and then put them up in one of 4 quadrants. So you can think of this as an XY graph, where as on the axis going up, I'm sorry, I was never a math person. I think that's the x-axis. Going up is impact. So your top quadrants are both high impact. Your bottom quadrants are low impact, where the Y is cost. So on the left-hand side is low cost. On the right-hand side is high cost. And there may be things that begin in one quadrant that move to that move across. So you might say that, for example, I am going to launch a new program. Well, or the changes in ADP in the adult degree program, when we partnered with JMU, that was a high impact, but initially to JMU, it was a higher cost because we were investing cost and JMU was sharing revenue with us. And then as we got the program up, got the marketing and recruiting going, that moved over into a high impact, low cost for James Madison, because the revenue share began to become a dramatically smaller percentage of the overall revenue coming into the department. But figuring out where your ideas are on this can help you determine what you want to tackle first. So if you have something off the top of your head that's like, this is high impact, low cost, you want to run after that. And you want to probably avoid the low impact, high cost at all costs. So a low impact, low cost thing may be, I'm going to make improvements to my email communication plan so I can better reach out to people. And that may be both something that starts and stays in low impact, low cost. But you could also say, well, a low impact, higher cost may begin if you don't have an email marketing system, or you say, well, I'm going to invest in a marketing enrollment system like Marketo. Well, when you first implement something like Marketo, when you first get that going, that's low impact and high cost. And it will move from that bottom right-hand corner up into the top left-hand corner as you begin to maximize and optimize that resource. So I always like to brainstorm all the possible ideas, and then a way to prioritize how to tackle them is to determine those ideas, the cost of those ideas, and the impact of those ideas. And that'll help you get a map going. All right.
Yeah, and I think the one thing I would add, thanks. I think one thing I would add to that, just reminding yourself that cost goes beyond the financial meaning. Cost is the time and energy and human resource that you need to expend. Sometimes you can't measure by dollars, but you can measure by morale. And so it's important to think of the costs that go beyond those finances. Same with impact. Our vision at James Madison University is to be the national model for the engaged university, engaged with ideas of the world. So not everything we do needs to generate a lot of revenue. So there might, on the surface, look like it is high cost because we're spending a lot of time and energy, but it's for our reputation and for the good of and betterment of society that we want to be in this space. So the impact is high. So you have to define what impact and cost mean for you at your organization and institution so that you can best determine where that sweet spot is for you, how much you're willing to give to get.
Okay, well, that goes really nicely into our conversation around change.
Yeah, so this is just a model. There's a lot of models out there on change, and I really like this one. It's pretty simple, and it's just a reminder, I think, of again, Nicole and I were just trying to think of the things that you need to think through as you're trying to figure out, how can I optimize my online strategy? And the first thing that you want to figure out is, what's wrong with where you're at now? Is there dissatisfaction? So you need to kind of look at where you are, what's not working, or what are you missing? Are you just kind of, easing your way through and just lots of missed opportunities along the way? Or are people really dissatisfied, or departments really dissatisfied with performance and you feel that things are really slipping? So determine what the dissatisfiers are. That's the first thing to do. The next thing is to think about, what is your vision? So if you know what isn't quite working right, what would the ideal be? What would that North Star, if you were looking for the guide that you wanted to be out there that would draw you in, what would that look like? How can you formulate that so that you are much clearer as to where you want to go? So understand where you're at and what's not really working, and then be very clear on where you want to go and what it is that you're really trying to accomplish. So having that vision. Then you need to figure out, there could be a chasm between where you are now and what the vision is. So what are those steps? And initially, what are those first steps that you need to take? What are the very first things you need to have in place and have a strong foundation of, so that you can build forward to reach that vision? So that's the first part of the formula. And the thing I love about this is you can have all this figured out, and if your institution or organization is resisting a lot, and that resistance is greater than all of these other variables combined, then you're not going to go anywhere. You're not going to be able to make the changes and to optimize what you need to do. So the first thing you need to do is you need to mitigate that resistance. That's where you need to begin. So your resistance level, you're always going to have resistance. So what you need to do is either reduce the resistance, and you can do that in many ways. It's by involving leadership. It's by involving those influencers in the whole process of how to move forward and change. You want to either reduce the resistance, or you're going to need to increase one of these other variables. You're going to have to make those pain points really painful. I know with everything going on with enrollments, and we're all trying to increase enrollments, right now there's a lot of dissatisfied institutions out there who are missing enrollment. And there's nothing like wanting to change and helping to drive that change than missing enrollments. That is a dissatisfier. So then you need to make sure you have the vision and the first steps that will help you get there. So just kind of think about change and how you and your setup would react to this and be able to respond to this by considering all these variables.
And this gets us to the questions to ask when buying versus building. And Melissa, you and I went through this, so I'll let you kind of go over what you see as the questions.
Okay. With building a solution, I think that, I'm sorry, on the questions, excuse me. You really just need to think through what kind of budget do you have? What is really realistic? And that takes a little time to pull together. Who are the partners within your institution? Sometimes you're very tempted to go it alone, but you might not be able to do that and have the budget you need. So, you want to be able to really fully think about, if you have the resources internally to move forward, what are they, or how long would it take you to get there? And what partners could you work with internally to help you get there? Those are some important questions to ask yourself. The other thing is, what kind of time frame are you on? Is this something you need a quick fix for, or is this something you have time and you're willing to take and do the due diligence to build forward, to make things happen? So, what are your needs? Are they long-term or short-term? Or are they urgent? Sometimes things you need to move really quickly. And so what is the best strategy to go about doing that? There's no right or wrong answer here. It's also specific to your situation at your organization. Again, you just begin thinking about, you've got to take a hard look at who you physically have on staff. I mean, sometimes ideally you might be able to do something on your own if you had this in place. But how hard would it be to get that in place? And would it be really a smarter or more efficient move to hire that externally, instead of trying to work through that and take the time you need to do internally? And then, what kind of experience do you have in this area? I know particular in higher ed, I have, in one of my previous positions, I worked for a firm very much like Nicole, so I really get what her and her colleagues do at that firm. And I can tell you there's an expertise there that really doesn't exist in your traditional higher ed institutions. And just being okay with that, knowing that, hey, we're really good at teaching. We're really good at providing service. We're fantastic at research. We're fantastic at scholarship. Marketing and digital, and data analytics, that isn't our strong suit in this kind of space. So we know it's worth an investment to go outside. So you've got to know where again, this goes back to that SWOT. What do you have the experience with, and what don't you? And where is it best to invest in, internally or externally?
So I thought Melissa and I would each talk about building versus buying, and I said I'd like to talk about building a solution, because there are definitely pros to building an in-house solution. When you get that in-house expertise, you can plug it into so many different ways and into so many different programs, and you can also be a resource for the university at large. Another big pro is your university, your department is the only client. And if you're working with a really good vendor, so are lots of other people. So there's the constant, we can get to that, but there's going to be some prioritization where if it's in-house and you're building a solution, that prioritization is driven by your goals, nobody else's. And you've also got some flexibility. So you've got the flexibility to help someone mature in their role, to put different projects in front of them, to task them with different goals and dreams for the future. The cons are, well, sometimes when you build that in-house solution, the best practices are not always known. And expertise, when you buy it and have it in-house, it can be expensive. So you want to make sure that if you decide to invest in building a solution and hiring somebody for that, that you're making the most of their salary. If you're trying to build somebody's capabilities for internal, and goodness, we've done this before. One of the people with whom I've worked with the longest, she started out, I kid you not, as a work-study student who is curious and dabbling with online marketing, and I think that was 15 years ago, and she now knows more than the VP of marketing. Like, she's brilliant. And that expertise obviously took time. She's been 15 years in the role and in her own self-development. Another con is additional management. And this is, I hate to say it, it's especially true in higher ed. If you hire somebody and they're not a good fit, it's really hard to get rid of people. So those are the cons of that. But let's talk about what the ideal looks like, because even with those cons, there's still, the ideal is possible. That is that you get somebody on board who's a strategic team member, who can get started fast and ramp up fast. And this is certainly something we think about as we are hiring. And I know when you're looking for someone and the need is there, golly, it can be so painful. And you might be willing to say, oh, they're 80% of what I want, but the ideal is they're 95 or 90% of what you want. They, again, increase flexibility in meeting priorities, and you're building bench strength and bandwidth. So you are building your team and their capability to do more and to bring more to the table. All right, Melissa, I'll turn it over to you to talk about buying.
Okay, that's right. So the flip side of this is, what are the pros and cons and ideal for buying a solution? And, the most obvious thing is, I think you can, just like Nicole was saying, if you can have someone that can ramp up and hit the gate running, that's fantastic. But most of the time, that isn't something that you can just readily do. And one of the biggest pros of buying it is that you, from day one, have expertise and best practices to implement. And, there is no learning curve. You're there. You're at the top of the curve. So that's a really big pro and a distinguishing feature, I think, between building and buying. Another is the opportunity to steal what works from others. So, and I say this to Nicole all the time, what is everybody else doing? Tell me about some of your other clients and what they're working on, some of the challenges that they've had. And so she brings that to the table and is able to share best practices that are happening outside. And we can learn from others' mistakes too, because they have that kind of experience, because they have multiple clients and have worked on very many different kinds of projects and opportunities. And accountability is easier too. The goals are the goals. We have a relationship, we have a partnership, and also there are goals. And, this is part of the contract that's set up. And so kind of counter to what Nicole was just saying about when you manage someone, and if you've got someone you're struggling with and you have all these performance issues, you really don't have to worry about that when you partner with someone. There are goals, and the accountability is straightforward. So it's easy to measure and much more easier to manage. Some of the cons is, again, you're not the only one. So, we know that I like to think, Nicole, I know we're your very favorite client, right? But
absolutely.
We're not but we're not her only focus. And so, and you realize that, that the company, they're an organization that have many different opportunities that they're following on as well. So, that's just something to consider. The other thing is really staying within scope and making sure that, if you're buying the solution and you say, I want to, make sure that, we're working with the ADP program, you can start to have creep. Well, does the partner also want to do this program with you, or this program, or this? So, you've got to kind of manage that and say, okay, well, our contract is this, and if we're going to do something else, then we probably need to have that as a separate discussion and a separate contract, and make sure that you don't have creep, so that you are able to manage the costs of that partnership. And then, we love our procurement people, and if any of you are on the phone right now, we absolutely need you and value you, and you remind us why we all chose not to go into procurement. There's a lot of stuff you have to go through, and there's the RFP process. You can't just reach out, and maybe if you're a private institution or an organization, you can't, but there's a process to this. This isn't something you can just put together overnight. You need to do it the right way. You need to be thoughtful, and that can take months to go through that process. So those are some of the cons. So, again, similarly, when you're buying the ideal, really the first thing is you've got this immediate access to expertise and industry know-how. And that just is really choosing the right partner that is a leader in that space is critical. So you want to make sure that when you are partnering, you do that. And I tell you, Nicole is a partner. She's not a vendor. And this is one of the ones that is at the end. You might have begun that way, Nicole, but we really depend on our partnership. If I have other partnerships, then Nicole, because we've been working together for years, I can call her and say, hey, I'm thinking about partnering with this company to do some consulting on this project. Do you know much about them? Could you recommend them, or would you recommend someone else? And so having that trust in your partner is really important. Something else that's really nice about the ideal is that you've got a whole team of people. I mean, there is a group of people that we now have access to, and they're part of our team. If you go to our website, you'll see the name and face of some employees that work for Education Dynamics. We showcase them. They work for JMU. They are our employees too. So we really consider them as part of the team, and that's something in the ideal too. Another one is the extension of your department with the understanding of best practices. So again, it's really just tapping into that. You're learning. We're a learning organization. So these kinds of partnerships, you're learning all the way, and you become more astute in this work as well, which is an important part of the partnership, is to strengthen your own knowledge and expertise in what you're buying. It will only make both of you better. Again, we talked about accountability. That you need to have a good contract that has fair expectations. You need to be able to change those expectations along the way so that it continues to fit what you both are reaching for. And again, you want to go into this with partnership as your goal, not just a transactional relationship. That is key in an ideal buying situation as well.
So let's say you've decided, okay, I'm going to buy some of my solutions. I'm going to invest in an outside partner to address some of the gaps that I have, or to strengthen some of the areas that I think are weak. Some things to think about and to talk about with your potential vendor/partner are making sure there's an alignment in expectations. So that comes from simple things like how soon can they start, which means also if you, for example, are partnering with somebody to get marketing up. They might be able to begin that initial process in 2 weeks, but it might take another 6 to 8 before the marketing gets up. And then the next question is, how long will it be until the marketing makes an impact? All of those things should be part of the expectations that expectation conversation you're having. What are the deliverables? And getting really clear on what, and by deliverables, that could be collateral that's being created, that could be support throughout the relationship, that could be key performance indicators that you expect to be able to meet throughout the engagement. All of those are important questions. And what kind of support is needed from your team in order to ensure that a partnership goes well? That's a great question to ask a vendor, because really a black box solution is not going to give you the kind of long-term value that you should be seeking out and expecting. A great solution will make an impact in the short term, but also strengthen you in the long term. And in order to do that, there's going to need to be some level of investment from your team or some individuals on your team. So values is, and Melissa, you and I have talked about this a ton.
Absolutely. Yeah, so, I think we can share in this. I think it's important that your values line up, and our institution and Nicole's organization, we match up in values. We care about people. We want to try to work through solutions together. We both like to move quickly. We both like to be transparent. We set up monthly calls together where we just talk. And those are the kinds of values that we set up. And it's important that you line up with that. Having, being able to know that, that you're accessible, Nicole. I know you and your team. I've reached out. I'm presenting to the Board of Visitors tomorrow, and I needed some stats and enrollments on retention. And I reached out to Nicole and I said, hey, can you get it to me, by tomorrow? I just need what you got. She said, yep, let me see what I can do. And so those are the kinds of things, having access to information and just working together and collaborating and lining up our values and being really open and honest with each other. Those are really important to me and to her and to all of our team. That is what helps our organizations line up with each other.
And I also, when I think about values, I think that there's also some alignment in being candid about goals and expectations. There are universities that I speak with that have expectations that just aren't reasonable, that expect when they launch their first online program that it's going to be like it was in 2005, when there was very little competition, when online programs were very much blue ocean strategy, and without that competition, you'd get crazy great enrollments. And sometimes having that alignment in values is having the capability to have honest conversations that go both ways. And you may, I feel like the universities can expect in terms of alignment and values is making sure that what is being created for the university long term. That's an alignment in the value of you're building something for the university versus for the vendor, which gets us nicely into our last slide on this topic, and that's exit strategies.
Yeah, so I think it's really important to talk openly, that this is a partnership, and it's not a lifetime commitment, if you will, right? And it can vary. You can increase the partnerships and have more than one contract. You can, the partnership ebbs and flows depending on what's happening. So some things to be thinking about when you enter into the partnership. You need to begin with the end in mind and be thinking about ways that you can step away if wanted from the agreements. And, you know, one of the strategies is having an out for convenience in your contract. And this is just something that you can put in that says, you know what, the tide has turned. We have a new president. We've got a new provost. We've got a new program that we're launching. And we really don't want to move forward like we were doing. It's not working for us anymore. That we have that out, we have that in so that we can make changes. The contract has some flexibilities in that. There's also an out for performance that you can put in that, again, this goes back to having those clear expectations and goals that feel that both parties really agree on. And this isn't only for us as well. I mean, I think education dynamics, if the partnership is not working for them with us either, they have an out for performance too. It's healthy. This is healthy. It keeps us both knowing that we both want to move forward. This is a mutually beneficial relationship. And so in order to do that, you want to be able to challenge each other and to continue to move forward in the partnership in that way. The other thing is a multi-program separation. So we have a couple of different contracts that are going on at one time. Sometimes you can do an amendment to a current contract. Sometimes it's good just to have them very separate so they aren't necessarily all ending at one time. We also have different components. I know we had a program, our original contract, Nicole, with you was in some non-credit programs, and we worked out an exit strategy to where we had a transition plan. And in that transition plan, Education Dynamic really taught us how to do the recruiting, how to manage the leads, how to convert them to enrollments, how to track the data. So it took us about a year doing this, but that was part of the exit strategy and the transition plan so that contract ended. And then we have a new contract that still taps into just the marketing and the advertising expertise that Education Dynamics has. So we were able to build over time our own enrollment strategy and people to do that work. And we have a different kind of contract now, a smaller one in that area that just focuses on one aspect of that relationship. So all sorts of transition plans. And again, we were working together along the way on this. And so it's a win-win for everyone when you handle it this way.
And talking about these kind of things at the beginning is always the preference when people are excited to move forward and get started. It's nice to think about worst case scenarios and have a plan for it. And if you have a vendor engaged in multiple programs, and you could say, well, on the renewal period, maybe we just want 3 of the 5 programs to renew, and that like thinking about those long term, that's important. So at this point, I want to do 2 things. I am going to launch a poll. Dun, 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 hopefully this will work. Which people should be able to see that coming out of this, we always like to offer a free assessment. So if you watch this program and you're like, I'm not sure what my strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, or threats are, something like a secret shopper assessment could be helpful. If you're not sure how well your digital marketing campaign is going, an assessment on that might be helpful. And these are one of the free services that we like to give our colleagues. And if neither of those 2 fits, let's have a conversation. We might be able to find something else that does. So I want to give people a chance to answer that. And then the next thing we're going to do is answer any questions that you have. And Melissa, while people are filling out this assessment, I wanted to share with you one of the first questions that came up is, what was in your SWOT analysis that made you think this department needs to buy what they need instead of build it? How did you get there?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And what happened, and I'll again go back to the adult degree program because that was the one where I was here and was a part of that decision making. And what it came down to, again, is we had this program. It had some name recognition at our university. It was a good program. And we knew that it needed some work curriculum. We needed to invest time and energy in developing the curriculum. It was a bit dated. It wasn't 100% online. It had started out as really a program for, university staff to get through for a way to complete their degree. And so we had added some online classes, but we were still just getting in the online space. So we had a lot of things we needed to do. We had some serious weaknesses, but we have strengths, and that is JMU has high quality programming. We have stellar instructors. We're very focused on teaching and service. So we knew we had internally what it would take to develop the curriculum and to add online design. We had that internally. What we didn't have was the marketing and the bandwidth to work with if we were to increase our students or have students that are, calling us virtually. We didn't have that kind of experience or expertise. We just didn't have it inside. And I didn't have the resources to hire people to develop those particular strengths at that time. I didn't. So we decided to put our time and energy on developing the curriculum and the program itself, and to hire out those other facets of the enrollment build. So that's what really led us, I think, that came out of the SWOT analysis.
I'm talking to myself. I'm sorry. I was telling you the next and realized that I was on mute. I apologize. Can you talk a little bit about how you build resources internally and how you've decided to invest in those internal resources, and maybe give an example or two of where you've done that?
Sure. So again, going back to our non-credit programs that, we're a self-supporting unit. And we were at a place when we first started with Education Dynamics that, these were very modest programs that had, low revenues. It was kind of going back to the model of the bang for the buck model, that they were kind of low impact and low cost. We were kind of doing them, and they were making a little bit of money. We were having a little bit of impact in the community, but they were just really under the radar. So by partnering with Education Dynamics, we were able to really increase our exposure, increase enrollments, increase our revenues to the point that we could then afford to bring on someone that was part-time. We had a part-timer that was helping, that served as a liaison, if you will, in working with the recruiter, with Education Dynamics recruiters. And so we were able, through the revenues, the additional revenues generated from the partnership, to move that person to full-time. And then this person, when we moved them to full-time, worked and was trained by Education Dynamics on how to do the recruiting. So this took planning. So we didn't wait until the contract was done and say, hey, now we're going to end our agreement and we're going to hire and do. We worked with our partner who knew how to train and develop this skill. So that's how we were able to build within. And to me, I think it was brilliant. It's a great strategy, and it worked for both of us. And that's how we've been able to do it. I think that something similar right now is going on with our ADP, our adult degree program, because we've been able to increase our enrollments. This is the first year that we are really seeing the revenues show up. And because of that, I am getting ready to put a proposal together to ask to hire another person internally that would help with academic advising. And so because we've increased the enrollments, because we have so many different kinds of people coming in with different needs, being able to have another academic advisor is crucial. And I have the revenues I'm showing. I have now the longitudinal evidence to show that we are increasing enrollments, we're generating new revenues, and this is where I'm going to put those revenues back in the program in a place where we need it the most, and that is with academic advising. So hopefully that helps explain two ways we've been able to build, we're building within.
That's great. I'm going to answer the next, and we'll make this the last one. And just to tell everyone, you will get a copy of this PowerPoint and be able to reach out to Melissa or I after this. We'd love to hear from you. And we're also going to send a copy of the recorded webinar, as I said, so we will do that. The last question that I wanted to answer is, how do you use the SWOT to determine the length of time you need before saying a goal has been met or not met? And for that question, what I tend to use is a balanced scorecard approach. And in a balanced scorecard approach, when you've got activities that you have highlighted as these are things we think are going to make an impact on a goal or an area, the activity that you have outlined needs to be specific. So you should say, this is the activity. These are the measurements that we need to hit. This is how we are going to measure change. And this is the time frame, because the time frame may be different based on the activity. But I would say if the activity that you've laid out takes more than 6 months to create a meaningful measurement, there is probably a sub-activity you can do before then. And so to kind of, it's the eating the elephant, there might be a couple mouthfuls that you can take before then that have measurements. And I would go at it from that perspective. Melissa, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, I mean, I think that's really sharp. I think that it's a great question because you need to do that. You need to think about the time that you have. And again, time is one of those areas that you could, it can work in your favor or not. And so really understanding what kind of timeline you're up against and how you can kind of use your strengths. I always like, to think about looking at those strengths and figuring out how you can overcompensate, right? That can really help in the time issue as you're trying to figure out strategies and length of time, really looking at your key strengths and see how can they overcompensate, either tapping into, strengthening through threatening times, or that it can counter a weakness that you might have internally.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Melissa, thank you so much for hosting this webinar with me. It's been fantastic. I want to thank everyone for attending. We will, you should see a follow-up in the next day or so that will have the deck and we'll have the recording. Again, I want to end shamelessly with plugging the CALEM conference. It's a fantastic conference. You will have the chance to meet Melissa there because she is going to be presenting at the conference along with some other fantastic speakers. So we hope to see you there. And thanks again for coming to our webinar. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, Nicole. Thanks, everyone.